Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. So we didn't do one last week, but we're back into the swing of things this week. So just to explain how these things work, we normally do these every Friday at 2:30 UK time. So and it's a look at the major markets every week, see what's going on, and then a look at any markets you want looking at. So once I've gone through the usual indices, FX, oil, gold, crypto, I'll go into the questions and answer any questions and have a look at any markets you want to have a look at. I just want to make sure if someone could just confirm that the sound and everything else is working at your end, that would be great. If you're having a problem with the volume, make sure the volume on YouTube is bumped up. Right, so that's the title slide. I'll skip that. Let's do the risk warning. This presentation is only for educational purposes and does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones and Capital.com accept no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. Spread bets and CFDs are complex instruments and come with a high risk of losing money rapidly due to leverage. 76.25% of retail investors lose money when spread betting and or trading CFDs with this provider. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets and CFDs work and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Right, a quick look ahead to what's happening next week. Busy week next week, particularly for interest rates. On Tuesday, we've got the Australian interest rate. I can't do anything with the volume at my end. I think you'll have to crank it up at your end. Sorry, Kieran. So Tuesday, we've got Australian interest rates, European GDP, so how well or how badly is the European economy doing, and Japan GDP as well. So big day Tuesday for economies. Then Wednesday, we've got Canadian interest rates. Thursday, early hours of the morning, we've got China inflation. And we've got European interest rates. I mean, interest rates, clearly, we're not expecting any changes at the moment. But given the concerns about inflation and everything, interest rates are really in focus. What central banks say are really in focus at the moment. So we'll see. We'll see how they come out next week. We just have had in the last hour the non-farm payrolls. Major announcement, usually every month. It's... what's the words I'm looking for? It's the US unemployment data. The market was expecting something like 700,000 jobs to have been added to the US economy in August. It came in at 235,000, so it's quite a big miss. We'll see how these markets are reacting when we get into this. Before we have a look at the markets, a quick reminder of the contact stuff. So I do this with Capital.com, so go to Capital.com. It's their trading platform I use for all of this. So you can download the app, open a demo account, open a real account, all that sort of stuff. To find out more about me and the trading course I run, go to davidjonestrading.com. Any questions after today, drop me an email, david.jones@capital.com. You can follow me on Twitter, @JonesTheMarkets on Twitter, and follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. We have our regular YouTube channel, which is this one you're watching on now. So we push out normally 3 different markets every week, pre-recorded videos. So if you're not subscribed, click on subscribe. But we also launched in the last few months a stocks channel. So if you look in the description of this video, there's the link to the stocks channel. So we looked at, I think Peloton was one we looked at this week, which I thought was pretty interesting. But we have a stocks channel where we push out different US stock info. So subscribe to that if you're not already. Right, let's get into it. Let's take a look and see what happened. What should we start off with? Let's start off with stock market indices, I think. Let's just have a quick scoot and see what the market made of that miss by the payrolls an hour ago. So there's the announcement. This is the S&P 500. So as usual, lots of volatility over the announcement. The market didn't like it initially, but as I often say with these sort of announcements, particularly a major one like the payrolls, you can have something of a headless chicken moment from a market's point of view, where they think, oh, actually, this is no good, and then, oh, it's okay. So I think the immediate reaction can often not make much sense, but we'll see how it goes on for today. But we'll have a look at some of the other markets as well. So let's start off with a bigger picture view for the S&P 500. If you've watched these before, you will know by now what I'm going to say. The trend is up. This is a market that keeps going up. Dips keep getting bought. There is nothing at the moment to suggest the trend is changing in the S&P 500, the broader US stock market. It did actually push today, just before the payrolls, to fresh all-time highs again. I think it's been a great market to trade this year. Most of my own, or a lot of my own personal profit has been in the S&P because it's been such a clear trend. You know, I mean, clearly the trend is not going to go on forever, but it is at the moment, famous last words. You know, so for me, I'm sure there are lots of people trying to short and pick the top of this market, but it is an expensive game, I think, at the moment. So for me, the trend is still up. I think it's only, you know, the very first warning sign for me that things were changing was if we pushed below the August low. So the August low is 43.50, so 170 points away from where the market is now. But for me, any dips for now still remain buying opportunities. It's a bit overbought, nearly overbought on the RSI, so it wouldn't be surprising to see it under a bit of pressure. But that trend still looks very solid, I think, in the S&P for now. So let's see. They've been saying the same thing for what feels like forever. I mean, clearly it isn't, but I think for as long as we're doing these live streams, the trend has been up. So for me, no change there. If we take a look at the Nasdaq, it's the same story, of course. The Nasdaq 100, the broader US stock market index. So again, that big trend off the March lows is still going. We have already in September seen fresh all-time highs for the Nasdaq 100 again. Okay, it's perhaps a bit overextended in the short to medium term. So perhaps it could be vulnerable to a bit of pressure up here. But again, for me, we've got good support from back here, mid-July, 14,450. Good support mid-August, 14,700. It's been a great market. The S&P, again, trading with the trend, buying the dips. I think actually, if I look at some of the trades, a few people asked if we could look at some of the open trades. I mean, there are a lot of open trades in this account. So this account has got real money in it. It's Capital's money, not my money. But whenever we do a pre-recorded video, I always try and do a trade if I can. And we do a trade, try and do some trades in these live streams. But there's, I think, the Nasdaq, so at the moment, there's £4,850 worth of open profit. And the Nasdaq trade is one of the big winners from the 8th of July. So buying 1.4. I think was that a live stream? No, maybe not. Buying 1.4 at 14,600. The market is nearly 1,000 points in favour of that trade. So perhaps we'll have a look at some of those other trades a bit later. But the Nasdaq clearly has been just a great index to trade from a swing trading point of view. We'll see what today brings. I mean, it is under a bit of pressure. It looks like at the moment, after those payrolls, lots of volatility. But if we look back just the last couple of days, we had a low at the end of August at 15,520. The market's currently 15,570. Let's see what happens. See if we can snap back this afternoon. But same old for stock market indices. Let's take a quick look at some of the European ones. So the Ftse 100, a bit of a lagger, the Ftse, but broadly speaking, the trend. Oh, what's happened there? The trend from March is still. Oh, hang on, it's not happy about this, is it? The trend from March is still up, but it is lagging. Some of the US indices, but we did see a recovery high for the Ftse during August. It needs to get a bit of a move on. But again, for me, only if it lost 6,800 would I start to worry about a deeper sell-off. If you take a look at the DAX, I mean, the DAX is hovering near those all-time highs. My charts aren't happy today, are they? Oh, hang on. Let me do a quick refresh here. Let's try that again. There we go. Well, this is going to make for an entertaining hour if I've got to keep doing this. Now, there we go. It's working now. little temporary glitch. So DAX again. Okay, the DAX, you could argue, is losing a bit of its trend line, but the volatility has been on the DAX relatively low recently. That again, for me, I'd only start to worry if we saw those mid-July lows taken out. So a bit of a lack of volatility in recent weeks for the DAX, the German index. But I think it's only if we start to see these US markets roll over would I start to worry. And the Nikkei, has the Nikkei finally, or is it finally, starting to break out of this correction that it's been in since Feb? So we are, how many months is that? 7 months nearly into this correction for the Nikkei. We look at it every week, and every week it's the same. So I think it's really interesting down here. I suppose an aggressive trade would to be go short. Someone said Nikkei broke out on political news, so fair enough, I didn't know that. But so it's an aggressive trade, if you think it's a bit overdone, would be to go short with a stop, perhaps the other side of 30,000. But an interesting market now, as it looks like finally, we could be shaking off the correction. One of the oldest trades I have in my own account is on the Nikkei, and it's been doing nothing for ages. So I did notice it had perked up a bit. So that could be an interesting market to watch next week, the Nikkei. So a bit of a lift for that one. Let's take a look at some of the cryptos, because I've seen some questions come in about that. We've had, I think I said, I mean, this looks pretty bullish to me. Bitcoin, we had that sideways stuff from May through to August, and I think we were doing the live stream when it broke out, and we've broken out, and we continue to break out higher Bitcoin. So I think there's a couple of trades running on Bitcoin. Hold on a second, or one trade running on Bitcoin from way back, from 37,979. And clearly that's a pretty strong move, I think, over the last couple of weeks or so. We've broken out well above the old level. That was a problem, 42,500, and here we are above 50,000 on Bitcoin. So what's the next target? I think it's going to be really interesting to see. Whoever keeps spamming the chat with the dollar index, I will get to it. Let's all just be a little bit patient. It's Friday afternoon. We had this sideways trade, broken out. Next targets, I think what will be interesting the next couple of days. Let's see if it can hold above 50,000. And I think if it holds above 50,000 and we have, a bit of price acceptance up there, then for me the next target would be a run back up to the May highs, May the 8th highs, about 59,500, that sort of level. So I think it's interesting. What we do have for fans of oscillators is what's known as bearish divergence. So the market is going up and up and up, but the oscillator, the RSI, is falling. So this can be a suggestion that the trend is running out of steam. So far, at least, it doesn't look like that, but that's quite interesting, that divergence there. So for me, if I didn't have a trade at the moment, perhaps being patient is not a bad idea. But that looks pretty positive to me. Ethereum, we've got a couple of trades running. Oh, big profits on Ethereum. So a couple of trades running on Ethereum from previous videos. So up £870 on Ethereum, and I think it's similar moves to the old Bitcoin, breaking out. I mean, I think it has over. Hang on, I'm just going to ding someone out of the chat a second. Hold on a sec. I just seem to be a bit spammy. There we go. Right, so what was I talking about? Ethereum. So Ethereum has definitely outperformed since that break through 3,000, which was the top of the sideways range. And here we are, just below 4,000. The old high is at 43.70. I think it would be really interesting to see what happens up at 43.70. See if it can break out again and start moving higher. So it could be an interesting week for Ethereum, I think, next week. But, clearly the trend over the last, 6 weeks or so is up. I'd still be, if I wasn't a buyer now, if I didn't have a position on, I'd still be a buyer of dips on Ethereum. We've got a bit of short-term support that's emerged so far this month, around 3,700. So I think it's interesting one to watch, but very, very strong. And it will be interesting to see if it is actually going to take out those all-time highs. So an interesting one to watch next week. Let's see what happens. What else should we do? Let's have a look at gold and silver. I don't know if there's a trade on gold in here. I think I need to have a little bit of a clear out of some of the trade. Oh, there is a trade in gold. So there's a trade in gold from 8th of August at 1740. So the market's 1820. I do think, I think I say this fairly often, but I do think gold and silver are not the most exciting markets at the moment. I think they're quite choppy markets, quite scrappy, no real direction. So we have, trends that might last for a few weeks, then reverse sharply. So for me, but for me, clearly, since we had that, we did do a video on gold earlier this week. Since we had that flash crash at the beginning of August, or the second week of August, it's recovered pretty strongly. I'd be a bit nervous now I've got that open position on gold. We saw the 15th of July, 1835, this whole area here. It's a real problem for gold. So for me, on that open position, it might be time to crank up the stop losses a bit to lock in some profit. But it's an interesting one to watch next week. So me personally, I think perhaps we'll see gold run into a bit of trouble next week because we're back up near the old resistance. Let's see what happens. But it's it really all the way through July could not hold for long at 1820, 1835. So I wonder if we'll see perhaps some nerves coming back into the price of gold next week. Let's see what happens. And the other one is silver, which still has, I think, my award for most boring market of the year. We go back 12 months, there's the 12-month price for silver, flat. I mean, clearly lots of volatility week to week, but no direction. Silver is trading today where it was a year ago. But we do have this recovery going on. I think we did do a video this week on silver, and that's the reason I've got that trend line in there, because that trend is still going. So when it's really taken off, I think it must be on the payrolls taken off. But we've had this really good trend since the flash crash again for silver. The trend is still going. So for me, if I really had to trade silver and had nothing better to do, I'd be looking to be a buyer on dips based on that trend. It looks quite extreme at the moment, doesn't it? I think personally. But for me, we've seen a lot of support from 23.30 through to 23.75 on silver. So perhaps if we saw it retrace some of this move next week, it could be an interesting one. I think what's interesting on silver from a price action trend point of view is that trend there, for example. You could argue that the June, July, August 3-month trend on silver is still down. So I think that will be an interesting one to watch next week. Again, I think we do have a trade running on silver somewhere. There it is from the 17th of August from 23.87. So that's doing okay. So, let's see what happens. It could be an interesting week next week for gold and silver. Gold in particular because it's bumping up near those highs from July. So let's see what happens with that. Oil. I did an oil video yesterday and actually went short oil. The first time I've been short oil for, I can't even remember how long. And I think it's a really interesting market at the moment. I think I've got a couple of trades on oil. There's an old Brent crude trade in here somewhere. Here we go. From the 9th of August. So buying Brent crude at 67.85 and the market is 73 at the moment. So that's up £336. And there's the trade from yesterday all the way down here. So selling short at 68.84 with a stop at 72, and that's losing £85 at the moment. And I think it is interesting, the price of oil, because we've had this fantastic recovery, as I'm sure we all know, from the lows in April last year. Fell out of the trend, and I thought, well, maybe it'll go back in. But it has, it pushed down in August to its lowest since, when did we go back to? At least May. And we've had this bounce back, and I think so at the moment, I think, well, what do you believe? Do you think that actually the trend for oil is still up and we're going to go back to 76? Or do you believe that actually there's a new trend forming from oil off the highs? So that the bet I took yesterday, in the video yesterday, was that this bounce is going to run out of steam. We'll see. I think it's a really interesting market to watch. I think if it starts breaking above, let's say 70, 72 for oil, something like that, then this downtrend doesn't really look valid at all. But it's going to be an interesting week next week, see what happens with the price of oil, because we do have effectively these two conflicting trends at the moment. So let's see what happens. While we're on the subject of oil, we'll look at natural gas. Again, there is a trade on natural gas in here, one of the bigger winners at the moment. So it's up £750, buying at 4.7 on the 27th of July. And actually, I've also got a trade in my own account for natural gas where I'm long natural gas. I saw somebody said they've got lots of natural gas sell positions. Right, for me as a trend follower, I've got no idea why I wouldn't short a market like this. Put it like that, yeah? I think this is the problem with natural gas, but that doesn't mean your sell positions aren't going to come right. But for me, I'm a massive fan of following trends, and I think it is pretty obvious which way the trend in natural gas is. I mean, it can be quite the nutcase market, natural gas, and can reverse very quickly. But it has really accelerated again over the last, 3 weeks or so. I mean, it's pretty overextended, from that trend. If we pick up on that trend since April the 7th, so we're 5 months into that trend. Great little opportunity there, middle of August, when it trickled back to the trend line. So for me, I would still be inclined to be a buyer of weakness on natural gas, but it is such a volatile market. It'd have to fall below 375, which would be a 20% plus move from where it is now, for me to think that trend has changed. So it's a bit of a crazy one, natural gas. But in the last couple of days, we've seen the best levels since November 2018. So what's that? Nearly a 3-year high on natural gas. So interesting market, I think. Whenever I do a trade on natural gas, I always get a little bit worried that it's going to go completely the wrong way straight away, because it can be so volatile. But it's been a great trend over the last few months for me, and it's one of the big winners in the account at the moment. So we'll see how natural gas goes. Right, what have we done? What have we got left to do? We've got some currencies left to do. I think some of the FX markets have been perhaps a little bit boring lately, but I think they're interesting. So this is pound against the dollar. So again, if you look back over the last 6 months, pretty sideways market. But I think what's interesting is that the sell-off in August halted at 136, near enough. And then on the lows down here, which was also the lows in July. And also the Fed lows as well. So 136 has been a big level for pound against dollar, pretty directionless over the last 6 months. So for me at the moment, there probably isn't a trade there. But it'd be interesting if we saw a bit of weakness over the next couple of weeks. But has it built a base again for a next move up? I don't know. Not the most exciting one for me at the moment, that one. Euro dollar. Euro dollar is another one where, again, we've seen clearly a bit of a turnaround versus the US dollar for these currencies during August. So again, the euro had slid from 122.50 down to 116 something. So we saw a 600 point fall in the euro against the dollar. But again, it's interesting for me that the lows from September, October last year, which were pretty major, have held again on the euro. So I would like to be a buyer of euro US dollar, but I'm going to wait and see if we get a sell-off over the next couple of weeks. If it goes racing away, then I've missed it. But interesting one to come back to. And the dollar index, finally, then I'll get into some of the questions. So the dollar index, this is a really great market. If you don't follow it and you're interested in FX, I think you should follow the dollar index. So the dollar index is the US dollar, as it says in here, against a basket of other currencies, the euro, the yen, the pound, the Canadian dollar, blah, blah, blah. And we have seen something of a turnaround in its fortunes this year. I think perhaps the jury is still out, but big sell-off from March last year, so we're seeing dollar weakness here. And then Jan, we can see how important this 89 level has been, and again in May. And I would be inclined to be a buyer when it stops going down, the dollar index. So I think next week could be an interesting week for the dollar index, from my point of view anyway, because it has been strong. We've got good support at 91.50. Clearly, it's taken a bit of a hit today on the payrolls, but an interesting one to keep an eye on. I don't know if we've got a trade. We do have a trade in the dollar index. I think we did that, looking at the time, 28th of May, that trade's been running since, 3 minutes to 3. I think we did that in the live stream. So God, that's an old trade, isn't it? I really should. I've probably given back a lot of profit on that trade, actually. So let's bump the stop loss on that to 91.20. This is the problem. I do forget about some of these trades, but let's update that. There we go. So I think that's a really interesting market to watch next week, the dollar index. So we'll jump into the questions now. But stock market's still the same. Stock market's still up. The trend is still up. Blah blah blah. Usual stuff. No signs of change for me at the moment. Cryptos are strong. Since that breakout of the sideways range over the last few weeks. Euro and the pound are a bit boring, but the dollar index is an interesting one to watch next week. And oil. I think oil is perhaps one of the more interesting ones at the moment to keep an eye on, because we've got these two mixed up trends going on. So interesting stuff to watch. Right, let me jump into the questions and see what's come up. I'm going to have a look. We looked at silver. We looked at the dollar index. Why are you shorting oil? I think I explained that because I thought the trend, that new trend, was down. So I thought it was fair enough. But let's have a look at Brent crude. Let's have a look at Brent oil. There's Brent. Brent oil hasn't broken its trend, to be honest, which is an interesting one, isn't it? Crude, US crude, West Texas has, Brent hasn't. So I don't know. Let's see. See what happens next week. So Brent oil for me, I do still have the long on Brent oil. So if oil does go scooping up higher, I'll make money on the long and lose money on the short and get stopped out. But let's see. Let's see what happens. Royal Mail. I did look at Royal Mail. Like a lot of people in the UK, or quite a few, I do have shares in Royal Mail because of the IPO they did, like the old days. It is interesting, isn't it? It's come right off that trend, isn't it? So it peaked. It was a heck of a run Royal Mail had, from like £1.60 to £6. It's come right off to 4.90, and it is, like you say, it is support. It is support. I'd be quite tempted, and clearly this isn't financial advice. If it starts drifting lower again, I'd be quite tempted to get out of mine if I can find the details. Yeah, interesting one down here, Royal Mail. So I'd be leaning towards a bounce. So if I had to do anything, I'd be a buyer rather than a seller. But let's see. Bit of a boring 6 weeks or so, isn't it? So let's see. Never short crypto. Why? Why would you never short crypto? Of course, go and tell that to people. Go and get in your time machine and tell that to people from whenever it was, 2017, to never go short crypto. Crypto is much more volatile than a lot of markets, but you should treat it, I should say, like any other market. I'm not one of these fanatics who thinks that Bitcoin is going to 2 million. Maybe it does. I think you should always have the flexibility to be able to trade a market both ways. Don't get married to one side of the market. Blah, 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 blah. Nikkei, we did the Nikkei. We did gold. Visa. Let's have a look at Visa. You'd guess they were doing well because all the US stocks are doing well. Let's bring it up and have a look. Have a look at it. I've done a lot more with US stocks myself over the last few weeks, and there's some really interesting ones in there. This is an interesting one, I think. So Visa, if we go back to the March lows, the March lows $134 a share, and they traded up just in end of July, 250. Which was probably an all-time high, looking at it. So as ever, we have the dilemma where so it's had a little break below the uptrend. But for me, I always give them a second chance and say, right, let's give them a chance to see if we can resume the trend. So for me, this will be one of the trades we do today. So for me, I'm going to be a buyer. So I'm going to take the view that I wonder if they've had earnings or something that's come out that's knocked them that much. So I'm going to take the view the market has overreacted. So for me, the big level is these lows from May, which is 215, 216. So I'm going to be a buyer. And my target is for a run back up to 250. Let's see what happens. So I'm going to put a stop at 210 and a thingy. I'll just let it run. So what do I want to do? Put a stop at 210. So we normally risk £100 on these things, on these trades we do in here. So if I do 10, so if I buy 10 shares at 224 with a stop at 210, my risk is just over £100 if I get stopped out. But this is one of the setups that I do actually really like, where we see perhaps an overreaction by the market. I mean, who knows? We'll come back to it and see. But I think that's a really interesting one, Visa, that it's sort of fallen out of the trend. But we haven't taken out any major lows yet, not for me anyway. So an interesting one to watch. Let's see how it runs next week. Facebook. Have I still got? I don't think I've got a trade on Facebook anymore. I can't remember. No. Let's have a look at Facebook. I don't know why I should still have a trade on Facebook. I must have moved the stop up really tight. I mean that trend is up, So for me, again, if the trend is up, I want to be a buyer. Facebook made all-time highs 2 days ago. If you went short Facebook today, what are the chances that you nail the absolute top for Facebook? I would say it's highly unlikely. I'm not saying you couldn't do it, but I'm saying it's highly unlikely. So for me, I'd rather be a buyer on the odds that we're going to see fresh all-time highs again. So for me, if I was a buyer now at 376, the closest I'd want my stop would be the other side of the 3rd of August lows, which are 347. So I think it's interesting. Great trend, as you can see. I mean, that's, most of the stuff I do is price action and trend. I've got not much interest in all the squiggles down here. But that is a trend that absolutely slaps you in the face. I think that one for Facebook. Euro Swiss franc. Let's have a look at that one. Euro chuff. It's interesting, isn't it? That. God, hang on, we've got lines all over the place here. Hold on a second. That's another quite a mixed up trend, isn't it? We had this trend off the lows in May 2020. I would definitely have been a buyer here and a buyer here and lost money. But do we have a new trend forming? I don't know. I think for me, if I had to do a trade, and I think maybe this is going to be another trade for today, I would go short. So we've seen a really strong bounce off those August lows. But I would be leaning towards, there's a new trend in place. There's a new trend in town. So let's see. So I'm going to go short, and I'm going to take the view it's not going to get much far through 109. So let's do that trade. So we'll put 109. What should we do? 109.30 for a stop. Sell. Hang on. Let's do the. There we go. Sell 17,000 euro against the Swiss franc with a stop at 109.30 up here and a risk of £96. I think that's another interesting one. It's a bit like the oil chart, where we've had this great trend going since here, May 2020, and it's really fallen out of it in the last couple of months. And is it forming a new trend? Who knows? I mean, I think it looks pretty good, that downtrend. I think it's a really interesting market to watch actually next week. But let's see how it works out. But I think that whole 109 area could be interesting. So let's see. How do you enter a certain position? Do you use different time frames, or do you just stick to a daily chart? Good question. I do have a trading course at davidjonestrading.com that explains all that. But in a nutshell, my own trading is based off daily charts. I think one of the big mistakes people make, you saw that risk warning at the beginning that we have to put up, 76% of people lose money. Regardless of the market, if the market's going up, down, sideways, whatever, typically 70% plus of people lose money trading. And I think one of the big reasons that people lose money, they're too short term. I mean, the short term is really exciting, of course, isn't it? It's really exciting to look at something, let's pick the S&P, and let's have a look at it on a 1 minute chart, and it's up and it's down and it's buy and it's sell and it's all crazy. And it's really exciting. But I think it's hard to make money. And for me, I'm in it for the money, not the excitement. So for me, it's very much daily chart, big trends, obvious levels, all that sort of stuff. Because if we take a step back off this S&P chart now and look at that, I mean, what's that? That's just, higgledy-piggledy all over the place, isn't it? The price action. And it's only going back to the 1st of September, going back a couple of days. But if we make it a daily chart, then for me, as we saw, well, this is an ETF, but same thing, the trend is clear, isn't it? So I'd much rather trade with the bigger picture view rather than worry about where is the price of the Nasdaq going in the next 15 and a half seconds. So for me, it's all daily charts. So there you go. Wells Fargo Bank. Let's have a look at that. See what that looks like. Wells Fargo. I think we've looked at these before. I think I remember looking at these before. It's interesting, isn't it? It's a bit of a funny old thing, isn't it? It got absolutely, properly clobbered in 2020. It was weak coming into March 2020, of course, when the pandemic really spread, but went from $54 eventually by October last year down to 21. What would you do here? I would probably be a buyer. I'd have a bit less faith in being a buyer than I would in something like Facebook, because you could say, well, is the trend starting to run out of steam? Are we, really starting to falter a bit? But I would give it again. For me, it's another sort of last chance saloon trade, seeing if it can hold above 41 and get a move back up to the highs at 51. So I think it's interesting. I think for me, if it started slipping below that 41 level, I think the risk is the trend is definitely over. But for fans of the old squiggly lines, it is oversold as well. Been oversold yesterday or the day before. So it's an interesting one. Interesting one. Natural gas. We looked at natural gas. Is AMC still a buy? I've got absolutely no opinion. For me, as I always say with the meme stocks, if you've made money off the meme stocks, well done. But for me, these are just crazy, stupid markets. They're basically there to separate people from their money. It's how an old cynic like me sees it. But for me, I don't know. Who knows? They could, in a week's time, they could be $80 or they could be $20, couldn't they? A stock like that. And for me, that's not a sensible market to trade. But if you're trading it, good luck. Good luck with it. It's just a bit sideways, isn't it? Since there's a lot of volatility, but the last couple of months it's just a bit sideways. So I really don't have an opinion on that one. Okay. What else? We looked at the euro. Dollar yen. Yes, we'll look at dollar yen actually. Dollar yen. I was wondering if the trend was still up on dollar yen. It's just it was a great trend here, wasn't it? Off the January lows. And then you're right, it is just sideways the last couple of months. What do you do? I don't even know. I would probably do nothing, but if it pushed down to 109, I could be tempted to be a buyer. But I think that trend has gone a bit sideways now, hasn't it, in dollar yen? So it's not one for me at the moment, dollar yen, because it's just a little bit directionless at the moment. Can we do Greatland Gold? So LSE stock, GGP, Greatland Gold PLC. Okay. So for me, that's, I don't know, how much is it? Is it 18p? Or is it, it's 8. I'm not a fan of these penny stocks. I know people love them. And the fact that it's a gold mine, I'm assuming people love even more in case they strike gold in Cornwall or wherever they're digging for gold. But for me, just the trend is down, isn't it? It's gone from 38p in Jan to 18p now. If somebody held a gun to my head and say, right, you have to buy these, I would buy them and I would put a stop loss the other side of 15p, for example. But I'm not a fan of some of these penny stocks. But if you're in it, good luck with it. But for me, it's a bit drifty at the moment, isn't it? So yes, it's probably not one for me. We'll come back to it in a week's time, and it'll be like £4 or something. England doing well in the cricket, great. Cricket is I never understood cricket. Just but they have tea in the middle of the day and all that. It's not really a game for me, cricket. But I'm glad that England is doing well. Uber, right? Uber. Let's have a look at Uber. We haven't looked at these for a while, actually. Uber. It's interesting, isn't it? It had a great run. I mean, the IPO was quite messy, wasn't it? I remember when it came out, which was when was it? May 2019. So it did really poorly. So it went from $42 down in March to 15. Then a great run with everything else, and it's really run out of steam, isn't it? There are, I think, a few stocks starting to look like this at the moment. So maybe that's the sign that we will get near the stock market starting to lose some momentum. But I don't know. What would you do with Uber? I suppose if I had to do anything, well, I would say the trend is down on Uber, isn't it? But for me, it's one of those ones where if I looked at something like this from my own account, I'd much rather find 10 charts that look like Facebook and figure out a trade on those, rather than 10 charts that look like Uber, where I don't think it's that clear. You could argue about going short because the trend is down on Uber, so you could go short with a stop loss the other side of the August highs. I suppose someone who was bottom fishing could say, well, the price is held at 37.50, so we'd be a buyer. So I think I'd probably be leaning a bit more to going short, but for me, it's a bit of a messy old thing at the moment, isn't it? Uber, so it's probably not one for me. I was thinking about getting into trading CFDs, but you pay overnight fees for holding long-term positions. Must kill the profits. No, it doesn't. I mean, I've traded. I mean, clearly, yes, you do pay overnight fees. I've traded CFDs and spread betting for, I was going to say 100 years, not 100 years, 25 years, and this is the Nasdaq 100 that I'm going to look at and do the example. There is a fee to pay, but actually I can show it. I'll show you on my account. So the Nasdaq. So then, for example, the Nasdaq at the moment. So my trade on the Nasdaq is up £1,000 since 8th of July, and my overnight fee on the Nasdaq is 59 pence. Okay, so yes, there is a fee. So that costs me. What does that cost me? About 15, 18 quid a month to hold that Nasdaq position. But I've got £1,000 profit on the Nasdaq. So there is a fee, but you don't pay commission, you don't pay stamp duty, and you're using leverage, so you're not using all your money. It's definitely not for everybody, don't get me wrong, because you're using leverage, but it's wrong to say the overnight fees kill the profits. They, in my experience, they don't. And as you can see, there are trades in here that have been running for a long time. So particularly with interest rates so low at the moment, if interest rates were at 7%, then yeah, it would be quite expensive to run longer term positions. But with interest rates at whatever they are, you can see in the Nasdaq, our overnight fee is 0.0037%. Yeah, so there is a fee, but don't let that be the reason to put you off trading CFDs. Let the reason be that most people lose. Let that be the reason. But I think a lot of people lose for really silly reasons as well, but we'll talk about that another day. Right, we did Uber. I wonder why Uber's got a bit of excitement. I wonder if they got results out or something. We did Uber again. Let's have a quick look. The strong US economic recovery, question mark. Okay. Vonovia. I've never heard of Vonovia. We don't list them, unfortunately, so we can't take a look at those. I was wondering how your trading year has gone so far. I had a good year. First, we have to talk about my own account, then we'll look at this account actually. I had a good year till June. Went a bit sideways, well, quite a lot sideways. June and July, and the first half of August, and the last 2 or 3 weeks, it started picking up again. So for my own trading, I'm happy with the year so far. You can't make money every week. There are times when I think markets, the last couple of months, some of the markets I trade have gone quite quiet. but some of the stuff like natural gas and sugar, funnily enough, sugar has been, we didn't look at those today, one of my better markets to trade this year. I've got, I think, a couple of positions on sugar at the moment. So for me as a trend follower, there you go. I mean, we've got, again, a fantastic trend on sugar. I don't know anything about the fundamentals for sugar. I've got no idea why it's going up, but I'm happy that it is going up. So we'll see. And this account, I mean, we started the story behind this account you're looking at now. When we started doing YouTube videos, Capital, back in the summer of 2019, so 2 years ago, this account had 10 grand in it, so 10 grand of money, Capital's money. At the moment, it's at 18,400, which I think is probably near the highest it's been. So it's up 80% in a couple of years, which if you watch any of our videos, you know I have a fairly conservative approach to risk in this account. We don't take massive risks, but it's delivered 80% profit in the last couple of years. And actually, the stuff that's making money in this account, I suppose, is not massively dissimilar to my own trading. There's no sugar trade in here, but natural gas, I've got a natural gas trade on. The Tesla trade in this is doing well. The Nasdaq trade has done really well. What else has really made the money? Apple has been a trade we've had for a while. So overall, I've had a fairly, boring, I'd say, 2 or 3 months of trading, but it's really started picking up again for the year to date. But I'd also say, I think if you've never traded before, because I would guess that lots of people on this live stream we do, you're going to be fairly new to trading. Not all of you, but a lot of you will be. Don't forget, most people lose money. Do not believe the rubbish you read from these people who say that trading is easy. Follow me on Instagram for great trade tips. The stats are most people lose money. So if you've never traded before, take the view that the first year and maybe longer is going to be something of a learning curve. So I think you are only in competition with yourself when it comes to trading. So don't worry that everybody seems to be making 3 Lamborghinis a day on Bitcoin. Do it at your own pace. There you go. There's the lesson for today. Alibaba, yeah, that's a really interesting one, isn't it? We did do that on the stocks channel the other day. I do think surely there's going to be a point where this thing bounces. So it's the Chinese online retail is one of its businesses, isn't it? But I mean, look at that trend in those since October 2020. So we're nearly a year into this now, this downtrend. So they go from 320, they've halved to 160. And I did wonder, were they going to stop here on the March lows, the March 2020 lows? They haven't so far. So we're now, we've traded as low as, a 2-year low, effectively, on Alibaba in the last month or so. So it's interesting, but the trend is still down. But we'll come back to it and see what happens. Ticker TASK, TASK. Don't know if we cover it, but we'll have a look. Is it that one? No, it's not that one. Don't know if we cover it. Unfortunately, it's not coming up for me. Electronic Arts, which is the gaming company, isn't it? Electronic Arts. Let's have a look. I think we looked at these before. They're just a bit dull, aren't they? They are really dull. So all they've done this year is go sideways, and they're at the top of the range. So at a push, if I had to do something, I'd go short. I think if they start breaking out through 150, they start to look a bit more interesting. But they've been, you can see it, can't you? Going back 12 months now, they cannot get through 145, 150. It'd be interesting if they do. Let's come back to it if they do, and see what happens. What happens next? What do you know about XRP? Nothing. Let's have a look at it. It's Ripple, isn't it? Isn't it Ripple? I'm guessing it like the others. It's going up, isn't it? We've done quite a bit on crypto today. So Ftse China A50. We did a trade on the Ftse China A50, didn't we? Ftse China A50. I think it's interesting because I think we did that trade. Let's have a quick reminder. Hold on a second. We did it in a live stream. There we go. 20th of August. So bought it at 15,000 near enough, and bought it because it was bang on that support. So it's interesting. I don't know. It hasn't done much since we put the trade on. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Platinum, yes. Let's have a look at platinum. I think platinum is in a bit in the last chance saloon for actually, I do have a trade on platinum at the moment. It's losing money, and it is in just either bounce or completely collapse. So I had bought it and got stopped out of one trade. That trend is gone, platinum, and it's all a bit scrappy now. And you could argue, and I probably have to argue, the trend is down on platinum, and it looks something like that. But it's sort of holding on for now over the last month. So I'd have to say, from a textbook point of view, the trend looks down for platinum. But let's see what happens. I think if it can break 1040, so $1,040, perhaps we see something of a recovery, and we see what happens. So yeah, let's see what happens. But a bit dull, isn't it, recently? Can we have a look at sterling yen? Yes, have a look at sterling yen. I've got a trade on sterling yen as well. Not going anywhere at the moment. This was my boredom of the last few months. Some of the markets that I traded this year and still had one or two open positions in. Sterling yen was a great example of a market with a fantastic trend, and it's just died since June. I mean, I'd say that trend is still up. So I do still have one open position in sterling yen. So for now, you can see, I think 147, 148 has been really good support for sterling yen. It just needs to get a bit of a move on. But the trend is still up. If it slipped below, let's say 147.50, I'd change my mind. But a bit dull, a little bit dull. Hang on a sec. I'm just trying to CrowdStrike, the old favourite. Hang on a second. What's CrowdStrike doing? CrowdStrike is still positive. The trend is still up. So I can't remember what they do. Security company or something, aren't they? There you go. Another lovely trend in there. So breakout in the last couple of weeks. So again, for me, something like that, whatever it is, I would look to be a buyer because I want to go with the big trend. The only question is, do I buy now at 275, or do I wait to see if we get a sell-off, perhaps down to 240? Who knows? That is the eternal dilemma, isn't it, of trying to follow trends, whether you get the pullback. But nice little good big trend there, actually. Copper, is it back to its old trend? I've got another trade on copper, actually. Dragging up all the trades I've got at the moment that aren't doing very much. I still think that trend is still up on copper, If you look at that since March of last year. So, we're well off the highs in May, and we had a little bit of a fiddle through the trend line. But as I often say, I always give it a second chance to see what happens. And I think so far it's held. We have, for me, 380 to 4 is big support. So for me, I think that trend is just about hanging on by the skin of its teeth. So I've still got a trade on copper. I think actually in here there's a couple of trades on copper. Yeah, one winner, one loser. So I think we did that in a live stream, 20th of August. So yeah, let's see. So for me, if it reverses and breaks below 4, I would be worried that the trend was changing. Coinbase. Now I would guess, surely Coinbase is doing well with all these crazy cryptos going up. Let's take a look. It's not doing too badly. It's not exactly blowing it out of the park, as the Americans would say. But you could say, it has built something of a base, hasn't it, over the last couple of months or so. So for me, I'd probably be a buyer rather than a seller. It looks a little bit dull, you should say, but it's still moved. What's it moved since the low? The low was 235. It's 271. So it's moved 15% since the low in August. You'd be better off buying Ethereum than buying Coinbase, wouldn't you? But let's see. So it looks a little bit boring, but maybe we've seen the worst of the slides for Coinbase. How are we doing for time? We looked at copper. Would you go long on Ambev? Ambev, South African. We might not have that, actually. Is that a brewing company? Oh, Ambev, is that the one? Hang on a second, let's have a look. A Brazilian company that produces beverages. Yeah, let's have a look at those. So that's the listing we've got. I'm not quite sure where that listing is. US dollar. So this is the US listing, I'm guessing. What do you reckon? It looks it's a bit of a, I mean, it is, you'd have to, the definition of an uptrend is a succession of higher highs and higher lows. We do have higher highs, higher lows. It just is perhaps something of a slightly inebriated uptrend. So for me, if I had to do anything, I would be a buyer. So I'd buy them. If I had to buy them now, the closest I would want my stop would be probably the other side of the May lows, down at $2.60, $2.60. But the trend is up. I mean, it's had quite the slide off the highs, isn't it? It's dropped about 80. Is it 80 cents? I'm guessing. So it's dropped about 20% off the June highs. So, but the trend is up, I think, for that one. If that is the right one. How far back do you go to start marking your trend line? Good question. Is there a recommended length of time to get back to get a good idea? Well, from an absolute textbook point of view, you should go back for all the data you've got, from an absolute doing it by the book. So on the S&P, for example, our data goes back to 2015. So I should go back there and see if there's any trends. Me personally, the default I tend to have is the last 15 months is what I have. And then if it looks interesting from that sort of snapshot, what would the 15 months look like on that? Something like that. If it looks interesting from there, then I'll have a quick check at the bigger picture and a quick check at the shorter term. But for me, about a year to a year and a half, something like that is what I would do. I mean, clearly, if you're looking at a 5-minute chart, you're not too bothered of what the 10-year trend is, maybe, if you're looking at the 5 minutes. But for me on the dailies, I'm bothered about the last year or so, is what I tend to look at. And then zoom in pretty quickly, like we've been doing today, to try and figure out where stops go and stuff like that. So I hope that answers the question. I should do the quick plug before I forget. So don't forget, Capital.com, open a trading account with all the trading we've been doing today on their platform. The training course I run, which is hours and hours of content and some live sessions as well that I do, is davidjonestrading.com. To send me an email, any questions, david.jones@capital.com. @JonesTheMarkets is my Twitter address, and follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook, and our stocks channel. Right, let's have a quick look how much time we've got left. We've got 3 minutes left, so quick. Palladium, I think Palladium is a really interesting one actually. Palladium is on my list to buy, and I think maybe for the wrong reasons, because it was an absolutely fantastic market in 2019 and 2020. A big percentage of my trading profits in 2019 and into 2020, before it fell off a cliff, was from Palladium. So I think that maybe I do have something of an emotional attachment to Palladium that I really shouldn't have. But I did wonder, I mean, we had this trend in Palladium that looked like that. So that's Palladium in May of this year, broke out to all-time highs, usually bullish. Didn't turn out that way. And it's got clobbered since then. But I did wonder, because it has pulled back in August to the range it was in before, from September through to March this year, would we see a bit of support? So for me, probably a trade I will do next week is be a buyer of Palladium with a stop underneath the old support. But I don't think it's a particularly brilliant trade, because the trend is all a bit choppy, isn't it? So I don't think it's a fantastic trade, but I think it's interesting to watch next week, because we have seen such a floor for Palladium late last year, in early this year. So there you go. We looked at Palladium. We looked at Palladium. Coffee, I did a trade on coffee this week, actually. Coffee's been another good market. I think I was losing money when I checked, but coffee, I was fortunate enough to have put a trade on here somewhere and held it, and when the coffee price went nuts because of, I think there'd been drought in Brazil this year anyway, so the price of coffee was rising. Then there was a period in, I think it was July, where temperatures dropped to zero briefly and burnt some of the coffee crops, so freezing burnt. Obviously, I don't understand it. So we saw the price go nuts and the price all go as prices come off since then. And I bought in again yesterday, and I'm currently underwater. But I think it's interesting to see what happens with it from now. I mean, that big trend is up, clearly. A better entry would be if it fell back to July around about 150. But I thought, well, maybe it's not going to fall back. And I was a bit chasing the market, I think, yesterday. So let's see what happens. So I still think coffee is bullish. It's just been, I think it's just, for me, it's very difficult when we have a market that has the sort of volatility that coffee has had in the last couple of months to know where to place a stop. But my stop is the other side of 170 at the moment. So we'll see. We'll see how it turns out. Right, time's up for me, I think. So we are going to wrap things up there. If I couldn't get your question, sorry about that. Don't forget, if you don't have a trading account, go to Capital.com. You can open a demo account. You can get access to all these different markets we've looked at today. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We push out 3 different videos throughout the week on different markets. Our stocks channel is in the description. DavidJonesTrading.com, find out more about me and the trading course I run. David.Jones at Capital.com. If you have any questions, follow me on Twitter at Jones the Markets, and of course follow Capital.com on Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. That's it. We'll do it all again this time next week. I think it could be an interesting week next week. That oil looks a particularly interesting one, I think. The cryptos look interesting because they're so strong. See what happens with Ethereum if it breaks all-time highs. So lots to watch as ever. Thanks for coming along. I do enjoy doing these. Look at lots of different markets. And we'll do it all again next week. Enjoy your weekend.